Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Aselia the Eternal. We are finally at the first battle, the tutorial battle. I figured I would separate this into two videos. One would be the tutorial where I explain the mechanics of the game, and one would be the actual battle itself, because I don't know that the game explains its mechanics very well, and I think that would just make it kind of easier to keep things consistent. So, alright, let me get that out of the way. So, this game works the way that you would expect, like a Fire Emblem or any other strategy game of that nature to work. You get to move your characters around these different nodes here, and if there's an enemy on that node, you automatically do battle. When it's your turn, that would be considered attacking. When it's the enemy's turn and they move onto a node that your formation is on, that would be considered defending. Pretty straightforward. Something that I think is kind of easy to overlook is the formation screen, where you can sort of move your characters around individually. But here's the big one. If you go to the status screen, you can see the character's status. You can see their class, you can see their level, their life, their different, I guess stats, you would call them, down here, and their mind. There's a whole bunch of different things that you can see in here. Pretty straightforward. But the way the game describes this is each character can have attack, defense, and support skills, and you can pick and choose which one they want to use, and that's actually not correct. The way it works is that a formation has 3 positions in it, right? So you see here that we have Aselia in spot 1, Aselia in spot 2, and Orpha in spot 3. This is the attack position, the defense position, and the support position. Meaning that any character that you put into position 1, the attack position, will automatically, by default, use their attack skill. So in Orpha's case, that would be Orpha Kick. If we put her into position 2, she would use her defensive skill. If we put her into position 3, she would use her support skill. You actually cannot change this, right? A character in the attacking position will always use an attack skill. A character in the defensive position will always use it as a defense skill, and so on. This is pretty important because when you are deciding how you want your characters to move around, you have different things to consider. Different characters are going to have different strengths and different weaknesses. Some might be better at defending, some might be better at attacking, etc., right? The big sort of opportunity, I guess, for skill expression, right, for skilled play, comes from putting the right characters in the right position in the formation to win encounters efficiently, right? Because, as you can see, you also have a limited number of uses of your skills. So if I look at Strike 2 here from Aselia, she has 8 current uses, 8 maximum uses, and she can use it twice per round. Skills, at least at this point in the game, only refresh when your character begins their turn on a town, right? So, for all intents and purposes, Aselia can only attack 8 times, Orpha can only defend 8 times, and Aselia can only support 4 times, right? Unless you retreat them back to a town or you capture a town, in which case these charges are refreshed. Generally speaking, attack skills, defense skills, and support skills are pretty straightforward. I would say support skills are where it gets the most interesting, but attack and defense is like pretty straightforward. You kind of understand how that works intuitively. Support skills can be a lot of different things. So Orpha's, for example, is the ability to do damage. This one, I believe, targets only attackers, which is important to recognize. Right? So if you use it in a battle that doesn't have an attacker, it won't go off, right? If we go to Aselia and we look at her Ice Banisher, this only works on supporters, right? It says right here, it does not work on black or Ed Ranger skills, but it works on blue and green and red skills. Right? This is where a lot of the strategy comes in, right? So Fireball, for example, which is Orpha's skill, does damage to attackers, right? That's what this suggests. Aselia has a Banisher or an interruption ability, and this only goes off when a support character or support enemy uses one of their support skills, right? Aselia actually has two skills. She has Wind Whisper, which increases the defense of your defender, and she has Earth Prayer, which heals the character who has the lowest current HP compared to their maximum HP. Now, that's all well and good. It's important to note that as part of this challenge, I'm trying to get an SS rank on all battles, which means that I have a turn limit for each battle, right? One of the challenges that this presents, as you can see, is that because I have a limited number of skills, or limited number of uses for each skill, I can really only push forward so far before I run out of stuff to do, right? In which case I would normally have to retreat. I thought, after a lot of experimentation, that the absolute best I could get was 14 turns, which is still an S rank, but it's not an SS rank. However, I've already shown it to you so far, but I discovered the status. This game plays a little bit of a trick on you. Aselia is level 6. She is quite a bit stronger than all the other characters in the game at this point, and as a result has access to a lot more options than you might expect. She has, for example, 2 different attacks, 3 different defensive skills, and 2 different support skills. Aselia also doesn't have the same variety of defense and support skills, but she does have 2 attacks, and she actually hits pretty hard with both of them. And so because of that, I was able to actually come up with a 10-turn clear for this dungeon, or for this mission, which I think is pretty important. Anyway, you can change out the skills of characters pretty much at any time. Right, so let me just show you how this works. Again, I'm going to redo the battle in full after this, so I'm not super worried about being efficient, but I'm just going to use this to illustrate something, and I'll show you what the battle looks like as well. I do think that compared to the normal character art, the battle screens are actually have quite a lot of charm to them. So you can see over here we have the attacker, defender, supporter, attacker, defender, supporter. Orpha is going to attack the attacker because that's what her skill does. Her skill attacks attackers. Generally speaking, you want to have an attacker, a defender, and a support. Or I should say, not that you want. The default is to have an attacker, a defender, and a support, right? That makes you well-rounded. But there are reasons why you might not necessarily want to have a full formation, right? One formation can only attack one enemy per turn, whereas if you have two formations, even if those formations are individually weaker, they can attack two enemies per turn, or go in two different directions on the map, for example, right? Generally speaking, the big thing that you really want to worry about is going to be whether you have a defender or not. As you may have noticed in that battle, when we had a defender, or when the enemy lost their defender, their attacker took more damage. I don't know the exact percentage increase. It's not like ×2 or anything like that. But you do more damage to formations that don't have defenders. Now, it's not a hard rule that you have to have a defender, but if you choose not to have a defender in your party or in your formation, it should be something that you do deliberately rather than something that you do by accident, right? So, for example, if you wanted to have two formations, you'd have one formation that had 3 characters in it and one formation that was just a solo attacker, for example. You would start with the formation that had a defender, and then you'd use the formation with a solo attacker to clean up, because realistically they probably aren't going to be counterattacked, right? So things like that are things that you want to consider. But generally speaking, that's sort of where a lot of the strategy comes into play. Now there's other things to worry about. You have, for example, mind status or mind levels. Mind affects how effective your skills are. So you see here that you have a mind balance of a minimum of 0 and a maximum of 100, meaning that if your mind value falls within that range, you're going to do the full effect. Whereas if you're outside of that range, you will have a diminished effect, right? You can also see here that there are type matchups, for lack of a better way of putting it. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I will probably forget this immediately, but blue counters red, red counters green, and green counters black. So I don't know what this means, but generally the way that I interpret this is that a blue attack is going to do more damage against a red enemy, a red attack is going to do more damage against a green enemy, a green attack is going to do more damage against a black enemy. Green defense will defend more against a black enemy, red defense will defend more against a green enemy, and blue defense will defend more against a red enemy. That's how I'm choosing to interpret that. You also have things here like your attack percentage, your defense percentage, and your resist percentage, which is an additional modifier on the amount of damage you deal or damage you take. The good thing about this game, in my opinion, and the thing that I'm going to sort of choose to end this video on, because I think I've sort of explained the gist of it, right? Is that there's not very much RNG in this game, right? In fact, there's very little RNG in this game at all. So if you take the same moves, take the same actions, the enemy will react in the same way, or at least should react in the same way. They have for me every time that I've tried it. Because it's kind of difficult to see, like I can't see the stats of this character, right? Because of that, it's really pretty difficult to identify exactly how much damage you're going to deal or how much damage you're going to take at any given time. As a consequence of that, I really recommend experimentation. Load before you, or save a game before you start a battle. See how it works. It may work out favorably for you, it may work out unfavorably for you, but then you can always reload it and know that you're always going to get that exact same outcome if you make those exact same decisions. Right? Don't be afraid to experiment. The other thing that I'm also going to mention is that because our character actions are limited, and I'll go more over to this when I actually talk about the strategy for this mission, it can be effective, for example, to have a character like Orpha that's attacking, even though she doesn't do very much damage, because the enemy may not have very much health left, for example, right? So on and so forth. You get the idea. This is really where I think the game becomes a lot of fun, and where the game kind of reveals itself to be quite a bit more complicated than you maybe first have given it credit for. You don't have to play the game really thinking too much about this, where you're switching back and forth between skills. That is sort of optimal, or optional. Like I said, I was able to beat this mission in 14 turns instead of 10 turns, which is still really, really good, without playing around with this at all, right? It was just purely a matter of moving my formation around in ways that I thought were smart. But, I mean, I guess that's pretty much the only thing that I had to say. The mechanics of the game are not especially complicated. It's really the way that those mechanics interact with each other. Hopefully, if you have questions, you'll be able to learn more about how this works in practice by watching me play or watching my strategies. But like I said, I do think that it is a game that incentivizes and rewards experimentation. So if you're really not sure about how all this stuff works, just go out there and give it a try, and I think you'll find that you are rewarded for that kind of iterative gameplay style. I hope this tutorial was effective. The next video is going to be my walkthrough of how to beat this mission in 10 turns, potentially less. Right now I have it down to 10 turns, but I might experiment a little bit more. And hopefully that will give you a better idea of how all of this stuff plays out in practice, the way that I'm able to use the fact that I have multiple different types of attacks to my benefit in order to perhaps defeat more enemies in a shorter period of time than the game maybe anticipates. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there for this video. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.